Empire. Getting to the bottom of the Washington Redskins' biggest stories, Dwayne Haskins and Trent Williams. This is the Football Jones Podcast. What's up, everybody? I'm Mike Jones. You can read me at usatoday.com. Check me out on Twitter and Instagram at @ByMikeJones. Today, like I said, talking Washington Redskins. I'm joined by my buddy John Keim, Redskins beat writer for ESPN. The Redskins are coming off of a significant game. They lost to Buffalo, but it was the first start for rookie Dwayne Haskins. But hanging over them is still the unresolved Trent Williams situation. And so I want to talk to John Keim about his assessment of Dwayne Haskins and his first start. And we dig into the way the Redskins have used him so far and prepared him or not prepared him, what the future looks like for him the rest of the season. And then we go into the Trent Williams situation and where we are now on that and where it might be headed. Interesting episode, and Cakes is one of the best guests you can have if you're talking about Redskins. So here we go. All right, and here we are with my buddy, you know him, John Keim, beat writer, Washington Redskins beat writer for ESPN. Cakes, how you doing?
I am doing all right. It's a bye week.
That's it's a very good week for you then. And I wanted to have you on to talk about Dwayne Haskins because it's just from here it feels like a very weird situation. And I just wanted to get your take on it. I've talked to a lot of people in there in the building, but you are there seeing him every day, seeing him in the locker room, talking to coaches, and seeing the games. So that's why I know that you would be able to help me out with this here. So what do you take away from his first game his first start in Buffalo?
Yeah, I think there are a couple takeaways. One, I thought they used him well in the passing game. I thought Kevin O'Connell did a good job with the way they used him. I didn't think they put, they kept the play. They used a lot of day one install plays for him to keep it basic for him, but just to simplify things for him so he could play more comfortable, play with a little bit more confidence, and feel good about what he was doing out there. So I think that was smart. They gave him some half-field reads, and I thought he executed better than I think some people maybe were anticipating because he hadn't shown certain things in his first couple outings in relief. So I thought that was all good. You saw some of the arm talent. Now, they didn't attack downfield. There were no huge plays like that, but he also wasn't turning the ball over against a very good defense. So there was that. I think, Mike, too, what we also saw after the game was, after the Vikings game, he was like we're standing 5 feet from the podium or so, and you could barely hear him.
Wow.
And, and I don't like, I know like they say he's a competitive kid and winning matters to him. And I believe all that. But I also think the quarterback has to project something too.
Right.
And I felt like after the Minnesota game, he was really, really down. And so, and you saw sometimes that was also a mirror of what we were seeing at times in other games on the sidelines. You didn't see the same energy before some games when he knew he wasn't going to play or he wasn't starting. And so I think like after the Bills game, I saw more of an even-keeled guy, a guy who was, there were times where I always liked about him. He can explain some things about what he saw or a decision he made. And I felt like before the game, I was around him near the field, and it felt like he had more energy. It felt like he was moving around with a little bit more confidence. So that's all good. But I think what it also speaks to, Mike, is that he's still a 22-year-old kid in many ways.
Gotcha. And I noticed that they didn't take any that deep shots. I know they were playing, a safety high to take that away. But do you think that some of it also was they didn't trust him to, or what did you take from that? Because he's got a big arm. I just kind of wondered when I rewatched the game why they didn't air out that big arm some.
Yeah, and I wonder that too. And I think there were some definite times where the middle of the field is open, and they always say attack the grass, and so there were some areas open maybe not as much deep, because there were times with the deep safety, sometimes he was 15 yards deep, sometimes it's 20 to 25. And they're giving them, on the cover 3 looks, they were giving them those hitches and comebacks. And so I felt like they took advantage of some of those. It would have been nice to see a shot or two down the field. I think he's only attempted 2 passes of 20 or more air yards this season.
Wow.
That's not going to be his game, I don't think. So you would like to see more of those chances take place. There were some times late in the game where they would, and one thing the Bills did very well is they did rotate their coverage post-snap. Now, I think it becomes, they're probably going to do that, so you got to be aware of that. There were some times, it's usually showing a cover 2 or a 2 high look, rotating to a cover 3 or a single high. So I do think that there are probably more chances that would have been available, but I do believe that they wanted to go conservative here and make sure you're not putting in position to turn it over. And, and there were some shots at the 20-yard mark that he could have had, but, downfield, you'd like to see a little bit more of that because Terry McLaurin can get down there. But it's also not like we saw guys running free down the field there. But, yeah, I'd like to see a couple shots, yes.
Gotcha. What did they say, and have you talked to anybody about kind of his instincts in the pocket? I thought there were definitely some times where you showed he had some great escapability. He spin away from a guy, find a guy downfield. Then it looked like there were a couple other times where maybe he didn't quite feel the defender coming in there. But what did you take, and what are they saying about how he did in the pocket?
Yeah, I think a lot of that comes back to something that's every rookie quarterback's got to go through, which is the protection calls. And then being able to see the pre-snap look and knowing from there how to then help set the protection, because the center's got to help there too, but it's the quarterback who's seeing where is the safety. What is the look against this, and what have I seen on film to do this? So there was one play, for example, where there's a corner blitz that sacks him. Now, to Haskins' credit, and this is where I liked what he said, but also where he's got to get to. So in the post press conference, what he said on this play, I think it was like an 8-yard sack for or 8-yard sack. But so on the play, the Bills have 2 linebackers in the A gap, and he said typically on film they do not blitz the corner off of this look. So that tells me, one, that he has a good feel for what they've done. That's good. Difference here is the receiver had a tight split, so it gave the corner an invitation to come. So I think where he's got to get to is adjusting off of that look. So, okay, typically they don't do this, but in a tight split, this guy may come. So then you slide the protection that way. That's the learning curve that he can take from that. So there's some of that going on. And there's also a couple times where the one play where he gets outside the pocket, on one of those plays, you got to trust what you see now. And there was on the other side, there's a 4th and 4 play where Terry McLaurin breaks open. And not breaks open, it's a stick route. He's open as soon as he turns. And it's almost sometimes like, are you trusting what you're seeing or not quite as confident with what you're seeing? You got to get to that point. And so then you kind of help yourself in the pocket there. But I felt like overall what I liked is in that Minnesota game, for example, there are the things I didn't like a couple weeks ago was he had one time where he was drifting in the pocket. And he threw back to Peterson over the middle. He threw the sidearm. But if you drift, you don't have to throw it like that. You're staying in the middle. He didn't have to drift. I didn't see that the other day. I felt like he stood in well against guard. There was one time where another blitz comes free, stands in there and hits and makes a nice throw, a really nice throw on an out route to Richardson, one of the best throws he's made since he's been here. I like that. He stood in there. And then the other thing that, again, I keep going back to the Minnesota game because it's a point of reference for me, but on the interception against Minnesota, he didn't step into the throw. The throw stands. So he's got guys telling him during the week, Doug Williams and others, saying, hey, step into the throw. And even if you don't think there's a lot there, step into it. Well, on that out route to Richardson, he's got a blitzer coming in. He doesn't have this big step in the throw, but you can see the weight transfer enough to make a more accurate throw. So I think those are some of the things that I really liked that I thought were good for him, and it gives them something to build on now.
Gotcha. Okay, so why would Callahan not name him the starter? He was asked about it and he kind of danced and everything. Why? What's the hesitation there? to not just say, yeah, we're going to keep rolling with the kid?
I don't know. I don't, and I think the only thing that there's a couple of things that I would, first of all, when you talk to guys, I mean, listen, I think if you ask players, they're going to say, well, either Case or maybe probably more so Colt would be the guy that they say, who's going to help you win right now? Who gives you a chance to run your entire offense and help you win right now? Now, at 1-8, nobody's been helping them win. So that's where it's like, so even some players who would say that, I think would say, kind of understand the situation they're in. You know that this guy, whether or not he's the best to help you right now, he's still the future of the franchise. So I think players would understand that. From Callahan's perspective, I don't really know why he would, but just thinking about it, maybe it's as much like you want to see how he responds to what just happened in that game. What is your approach? Are you coming in the next morning at 6:30 to watch and go over stuff? And how are you responding to that? Because I think for him, everything's been, how are you responding to X, Y, or Z? How are you responding to being in a dysfunctional situation where some people here don't want you? And the response wasn't always the best. Maybe understandable, but you can't just say, oh, well, if you're a team, you can't just say, well, he's 22. You can respond a certain way and everything's okay. That's not how it works. We might understand the response, but they need to see a different one. So the last few weeks, the response sounds like it's been better. So that's the only thing, Mike, that I can wonder is, are they waiting to see something, how he handles this week before then going forward? Because if you see what you want to see at 1-8, you're coming off a game where, you only produced 9 points, but he wasn't, you saw enough where you can say, okay, let's see more.
Gotcha. So, what I know you said some guys might say, okay, Case or Colt or whatever, but who are some of the guys in that locker room that are kind of not beating the drum for him, but kind of like, I know Terry McLaurin, but like veteran guys, does he have guys who are in his corner and feel like, hey, they need to play this kid?
I'm not really hearing that guys are saying they have to play him. Okay. I think guys would understand if they're going to play him. Because I think, that's been one of the things is that there really aren't guys that I think are banging the drum that way. But I think what you'll hear from guys is he has a lot of upside. And I think that's something that they will point to. I think he does have a guy like Adrian Peterson who is going to try and get him in that right direction, or at least give him the words that he needs to hear, encouraging words, whatever. And I think like Terry McLaurin will do that too. McLaurin will talk to him about, staying even keeled and not like he's a guy who lives and dies with each play, with each rep. You've got to be more even keeled. And I think so there are guys who are telling him things and staying in his corner that way, because I think while they're looking at their here and now, they're also able to see that this kid is the future, and part of developing this kid is staying in that corner and getting him to, if they. So I don't want to say, because if I say focus the right way, I don't want people to think that they
right.
But staying focused and pushing your energy in a certain direction. We've all been in situations where your energy can go one way or another, positive or negative, and in any work situation that's the case, right? So you've got to make sure that you're pushing that energy in a positive direction and doing the things that they want to see from you. So I don't think there's necessarily any guys saying that per se, but I do think that there are guys who understand what he is here and are trying to help him get there and keep him motivated, keep him sharp. Because I think, it was clear early on that maybe the motivation was lacking a little bit, or not. Maybe he wasn't as into it because he knew, or he was just in a situation that wasn't as good for him.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Whether that's good or bad, that's how it was.
Yeah, I mean, some people are like that. You would like to see a guy go out there and do everything, to the letter, whether he's playing or not. But some people actually need that to be able to be engaged. And I guess that's just kind of understanding maturity, also understanding the guy you're working with there.
And I agree with that. And there's, and I've said this before too, like, he's a 22-year-old kid who they need to be a 30-year-old quarterback. In an ideal world, he doesn't play this year.
Mhm.
And because they knew when they drafted him, it would take a while. And they were okay with that. And that's one reason why they went out and traded up to get Montez Sweat, to give them a first-round pick who could help now. And, so I think they understood that, and they were willing to live with that. The problem here isn't Dwayne Haskins. The problem is that everything else fell apart around him. Now he becomes this guy who's like, okay, now where are you at? And so I think there was so many things that contributed to this that are outside of his doing. But now he's the one that we're all going to look at, because you're 1-8. What else is there? So you're right, and that's not everybody develops a certain way, matures the same time, and all that. And I think this is where, like, some people would have said, oh, it would have been good for him to go back to college so we could see more of that growth there. But you don't have that luxury anymore. But I think that's part of it. I think that inexperience, and again, you're Mike too. He's a kid who's never had this level of adversity while he's been a starter, whether it was in high school or college. In college, he sat behind JT Barrett, and he stayed there, and he eventually emerged. But when he started, there were no issues. I mean, he had to grow there, but he was growing around talent. So what you're seeing is results, and coaches see process, right? So like there were times last year I'd watch him as an Ohio State guy. You're watching him and saying, okay, he's got to get better here. But while he's got to get better here, he's putting up numbers. Then the numbers went off the charts later in the year as the stuff progressed more. So I do think there's an element of that while everybody would like him to be a certain way, right now he wasn't there, and they knew he wasn't going to be there, and they knew it was going to take time, and it is. And now he's got a chance to grow and see. Again, my big thing is, how do you respond to this? You know this with kids and sports and all that. It's a journey with everybody, and this is all part of it. It's you can't look at just results oriented. You've got to look at process oriented when you're trying to develop the foundation for a young quarterback.
So, I mean, I know Callahan is saying this, we'll see, but it doesn't benefit him at all, I don't think, now the rest of the way, to not be playing. They're 1-8. You hear people say they need to evaluate them to see what they have, so they can, because they're good quarterbacks coming out. The impression I've got is that they're not going to draft a quarterback in the first round next year. But still, for his development, he needs to be playing.
Absolutely. And I think, again, 1-8, and I'll be honest, Mike, you know how this works. Like, as a reporter, this is all we have left to measure. Because, I like to go back and watch games. If Case Keenum's in there and they fall to 1-9 against the Jets, it's going to be hard to go back and watch some of that stuff, because I'm like, what are we watching here? So I agree with that. I don't know. Like, the concern I would have is, if you don't go back to him, what message does that send him and everybody else? And if you're trying to build something, then I think you need to continue that message of, like, he is developing. He did do this, and Callahan had a lot of good things to say about him after the game and on Monday as well. So I do think ultimately they do turn to him. But and I know there's a lot of things he's got to work on, but I just don't see what choice there really is, because if you are building for the future on offense, this is the future. I mean, Case Keenum and Colt McCoy may not be here next year. And so what are you trying to accomplish? I know you want to win some games, but you're not winning them. So, it becomes about his development. And you can be hard on him too. You can, if he's not doing the things you want to see him doing off the, away from the field, and I'm not saying he is or isn't, but if that's something you say, then you've got to get on him to do more. And players have to then get him to do more, and he has to do more. But if that's part of the thing, I don't know that it is, but if it is, there's a lot of things that you can do to maybe push that, but he's got to play at this point. There's really, he's got to play. And you're right, and not to go on, but you're right. Like, people have to remember, Bruce Allen and Dan Snyder wanted this kid. Mm-hmm. They're not going to abandon him after a year, or even after, like, if he doesn't play the rest of the year, they're still going to go with him next year. but you still want to at least see, because the other thing, Mike, too, if I'm another coach trying to decide if I want to come here, I kind of want to see what this kid can offer. And if you had your mind made up on this kid before the draft last year and you're another coach, maybe he changes your mind if he develops something the rest of the way. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe it works in reverse. I don't know. But at least it gives other people a sense of what they're going into. I mean, I would also say, too, just as important as that game tape for him is the practice tape, because a new coach will watch that as well. So your approach all over the place is going to matter for everybody.
Last one for you, Cakes. What do you make of the Trent Williams thing, and what do you foresee happening here? I know it's mind-bending. I've talked to a lot of people. I feel like Trent is genuine. I feel like he's gotten bad advice throughout this thing. I feel like there's things he's mishandled. I feel like there's things the Redskins have mishandled. But I wanted to hear your take on it, and what you think is going to wind up happening.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that one, because there's some, as we both know, there's like some inconsistencies all over the place and things that, like, I'm not quite sure how this fits here or this timeline here or whatever. And that's not casting blame on a side or another. It's just the way that it's the things you're hearing all over the place. It's like, how does this add up here? And so I think there's like that adds to the confusion. And then, like, when you see the Redskins automatically jumping and saying, hey, we want a third-party review, it makes you wonder, well, what is it that they're so confident in? And I know that they're, talking to people there, I know that they're confident in their version of events. And talking to Trent, you better believe he's confident in what he thinks too, and how scared he was. I mean, that is genuine. And Trent Williams is not an actor. That's genuine. And when you talk away from there, it's still there. And I think it scared the hell out of them. And I think that's, there. Now, as far as like what, the NFLPA came out and put out their statement, I just, my gut says that he's not going to play here this year. That there may be a hard time finding a helmet that fits. Whether or not he wants to play or not, I just think that that's going to be a difficult thing. And I think, my gut tells me that there's just so much more, whether it's a grievance, whether it's, whether or not this third party thing gets reviewed, because I think that Trent has to give some okay in this, doesn't he? Well, so that's the thing that I'm a little bit confused on.
Well, from what I've been able to gather, he can tell the NFLPA that he doesn't want to go along with the investigation. But if they feel like, no, there actually was something really wrong, there's some type of clause that they can conduct their own investigation as well. And then whatever they find, along with this thing would come out. But at the same time, they have to consider, do they really want to anger or upset one of their guys? If Trent's really saying no, they would have to feel very confident that they were going to find some wrongdoing that was enough of a smoking gun to get, the Redskins in a lot of trouble, for them to conduct that thing. So it's really a tough situation here, because, Trent wants to move on, and I in talking to him, he has a lot of respect for, people in that building.
Yeah.
And he was hoping this thing could have just been resolved quietly. And he didn't want to be sitting in front of that locker and explaining all this stuff.
No, he did not.
And so that's why it's just such a really complicated thing.
It's a bad place that they're both in right now. I think, because if you're the Redskins and if you feel like, hey, wait a minute, that doesn't add up that way, you have to worry about the locker room, but also the outside perception, because that's going to matter for attracting other people. And if you're, so I think all that matters. And that's a little bit what's at play here, because if you're hearing what Trent Williams is saying, and I know one of the discrepancies they had was when he said that nobody visited him in the hospital in Chicago. And then, you hear from people there, it's like, well, Larry Hess was there for a week. So, that's like, okay. But again, when you talk to Trent and you see the pictures, I saw the pictures of his scalp after the surgery. it scared the hell out of him, and it would have scared me too. Like, I heard so many things throughout this, and you're right though. The one thing that was hard was to sometimes get any sort of confirmation or any sort of anything from his side, and people think that his side was leaking stuff. They were not. Not to us. Maybe to D Hall, but not to many others, man. Because that's where it was hard to get sometimes to be able to piece together a fully accurate picture of what this was about. Now, from the Redskins end too, Mike, that they always felt like this was as much about money as anything. And Trent did say that, he wanted the guaranteed money. And like part of it is like, okay, if you want me to play here, I want this guaranteed. And, we all would like guaranteed money. But so I think there was an element of that as well. But is that something that says, if you're going to want me to play here, this is what I want? And otherwise I'm not playing. And that clearly seems to have been the case. And I just, it's not going to be, when you look at trends, like you want a guy who wants to play for you, play for your organization, something you believe in. And he's clearly not at that point here.
Yeah. And from also, I think that he did want, guaranteed money. Yeah. I think if the health scare thing never came up, I think that he's, fighting and standing for wanting a contract thing. Yep. And say the contract thing was already taken care of and the health scare thing came up, I think that he would have been, having these same feelings. I think it's almost like a unlucky, a bad storm with both of these things running parallel. Because yes, he does want more money, but at the same time, the way that they handled him makes him not want to be here.
Right, and he's a guy that a lot of players respect, and it's been this is a tough one to have a battle with. And there have been other guys here that, like, whether it's a Sua Cravens or some other guys where the perception may be more split because of the reputation, right? And here, I think it's Trent Williams. This is a different guy that you're dealing with on this level. But, like I said, I know that the Redskins feel pretty good about their version of events. And I don't know all the reasons why. But the fact that they asked for that, and just in talks to people there, that's the feeling I've gotten. And again, I say that, and I have to add that Trent Williams feels the same way about his version.
Right.
Here we are. I mean, it's messy, and I just don't see there's not going to be some clean break. Or some clean resolution. It just doesn't lend itself to going that way.
Yep, exactly. Well, Cakes, I know that you're busy. I really appreciate your time. We're going to continue to follow both of these stories, Dwayne Haskins, Trent Williams, the rest of the way. It's we got 9 more, we're with 7 more weeks left in the season.
7 more games for them, man. 7 more.
Yep.
7.
All right. Tell everybody where they can find you, Cakes.
Awesome, Mike. On Twitter at John_Keim, Keim, and then podcast, the John Keim Report. And on ESPN.com, I got to say that. They kind of pay the bills.
Yeah, I was about to say. Goodness.
I buried the lead on that one. ESPN.com.
Guy gets all big time with his own podcast and everything and just forgets where he came from. All right, Cakes, thanks a lot. Oh, and I will be seeing you later this week.
Awesome. Yep. There we go. Channel 4. All right.
That's right. Redskins Showtime, NBC4 on Sunday. I will see you, man.
Thanks. See ya.
Hope you enjoyed that. The Washington Redskins are on a bye this week, and then they will get back to work next week facing the New York Jets, which should be a winnable game. We'll see how this thing continues to play out for them. Hope you guys have a great rest of your week. We'll be coming to you Monday morning, assessing the latest action and also taking a look at a rather intriguing position group that is on the rise right now in the NFL. We'll be getting into that with a special guest Monday morning. Thanks again, and I'll catch you next time for another episode of Football Jones.